Now that we're in full quarantine mode here in Hawaii and on the Big Island, what is it like and how is it affecting the real estate market? We'll talk about that up next. Hey, what's going on, friends? We are now in the 14-day quarantine restriction period that the governor of the state of Hawaii has put on all visitors. So basically, if you come to Hawaii, you have to quarantine for 14 days prior to leaving your hotel room if you're a guest, or your home if you are returning home from somewhere else. And that's pretty much put a screeching halt on all visitors coming to the island, which is what the intended desire was. But pretty interesting that as of a couple days ago, the visitor count is down to like 820, 30, 40 people come into Hawaii a day, and only like 160, 170 of them are actually visitors. The rest of them are crew or returning residents. And so that's compared to like 30,000 people usually come in a day to the island. So that's a huge change. Definitely is going to help in flattening the curve and reducing the number of new cases in the islands coming from other places. But obviously, that's going to affect the real estate market here pretty significantly, and just life in general has been very different. It's very odd. It's almost like Kona 30, 40 years ago, where it's very quiet. There's hardly any traffic on the roads. I mean, clearly you can see the difference of no visitors being here and no visitors coming, and even the stores, the initial rush on goods at the stores have kind of died down. And so I went to Costco last week and it was pretty empty. And just as you go around town, because Kona is a tourist town, it's very, very empty. A lot of the stores and restaurants are closed up or just doing takeout. So it's an odd feeling after years of seeing Kona being busy all the time. And that's not really the case for the whole island, though. I went to Hilo the other weekend just to check it out and see what was going on and run a few errands over there. And Hilo is somewhat of a more local town, and so there was a lot more people around and about and at the stores. The population there, I don't think is affected as bad as it is in the west side, because they don't have the high amount of tourists that are usually here on the west side. So Kona felt a little bit more, or Hilo felt a little bit more normal than Kona did, but definitely, we're seeing the change all across the island in terms of the amount of people, and just people are listening to the order, sheltering in place. Beaches, most of the beaches are empty, or residents are starting to shut down some of the beaches that weren't shut by the state or the county, just to protect and deter people from going and not following the social distancing guidelines. So it's been an interesting time here on the Big Island, and obviously real estate is changing pretty significantly. A lot of our buyers especially come from somewhere else, so the fact that nobody's here, there's a lot less activity on the buyer side, and there's a lot of new restrictions in terms of what we can and cannot do. Real estate in general has been deemed an essential service, so we're still able to go and do things that need to happen throughout a transaction if we're already in the process. And there are still some new transactions happening, not as many, not nearly as many, but there are still some new ones happening. But we can't do open houses anymore. That seems pretty obvious and a good idea. Showings have to be somewhat modified, so we're trying to minimize the interaction with buyers and sellers at showings, or just our interactions with clients when we take them to see a home. We're asking sellers if the home is occupied to leave doors open, leave cabinets open, so a buyer doesn't have to go in there and touch a bunch of stuff, right? If they want to see inside of the cabinets or inside of closets, or just don't touch them at all. And if you're really interested during the inspection period, we can get you in there to get a second look and look at all of those areas. So just trying to minimize the interaction, the touching, the transferring of germs from one group of people to the next. So showings have definitely changed. The whole process is definitely adjusting and evolving. So for example, if you're in escrow, the escrow companies are adjusting the way they do business in terms of interaction, because you do have to physically sign. A lot of the stuff that we do in a transaction can be done electronically. You can send for electronic signatures and you don't have to actually interact. But at the end of a transaction, you do have to get some of the documents wet signed with a notary. And so a lot of times people will either go into the escrow company or they'll hire a notary to go to that client and take care of that paperwork. And so that's changing. There's one escrow company that I've heard of is doing drive-up signing, so you can drive up and they have a tent set up and they'll have all of your documents tabbed and ready to go, so they can hand it to you. You can sign it in your car. They'll take a picture of your ID, they hand it back, and then they can get the document signed that way. So transactions are still closing. The process is still going forward. The Bureau of Conveyances has also stopped accepting documents, and so that's another issue where we are continuing to close transactions, but those may be recorded officially with the Bureau of Conveyances at a future date when things clear up. So that's another part of the process that has changed. And obviously the lending piece of the puzzle has also changed, and that is a changing dynamic on a day-to-day basis. I've been having conversations with lenders trying to get updates on that, and it's almost daily things will change in terms of what the requirements are. For example, in the past, if someone went on temporary unemployment, a lot of times they could use that income to continue to move that process along, and then once the person goes back to work, as long as they get a pay stub or two, they would be able to then close that transaction. But right now they're not even moving forward at all with any unemployment income, because there's just so much uncertainty as to when people will return. And so some lending programs are changing in terms of lower down payment programs, or programs where they verify your income based off of bank statements and business P&Ls and things like that. So it's a very volatile time. Rates are going up and down pretty significantly. So a lot of people were doing refis a couple of weeks ago because rates were low, but then rates have gone up a point and they go back down a point, and so they're all over the place. So that changes daily, and you really have to stay on top of that. So if you're in that process, or you're looking at making an offer and getting involved, you definitely want to have a conversation with your lender, and daily get an update on what you should be looking for, what the best strategies are, and what to be prepared for, because it may be the best strategy just to hold off a little while, but you may be able to move forward. So you really want to do some research and figure that whole part of it out. In general, life goes on here, and we're hoping that everybody's just staying safe, and we'll get through this as quickly as possible. But it's a very interesting time, definitely an unprecedented time. And if you are looking, that's one definite piece of feedback I've gotten from a lot of people, is that they're looking at their situation, and maybe they were looking to move here a year or two from now, but now they want to do it sooner, because do you really want to be in a big city when something like this happens? And Kona, in Hawaii, we are isolated, but at the same time, we also are a pretty nice place to live. Great weather. We have lots of fruits and stuff that you can eat if you needed to live off the land. I mean, I definitely wouldn't want to be in a big city with a couple million people if something like this happened and it continued to get worse. So I don't think it will. I'm always an optimist about stuff, but this is definitely a place where I think people are reevaluating where they want to be when something like this happens. And so you want to be ready, right? I mean, your plans may be a little ways out, but when this all clears up, have travel plans ready, get your pre-qualification process going, just prepare yourself, start looking at the market, start talking to a realtor that can help you prepare so you're ready to pull the trigger when the time comes, because this is not going to last forever. Things will go back to somewhat normalcy. If there's other effects economically, that's yet to be seen. We'll just have to deal with that when the time comes. But it's a very interesting time, and I'll continue to provide updates. If you have any specific questions about anything, please let me know. But in general, things have slowed down pretty significantly, as you would expect. But we're hopeful that things will turn around and pick right back up when everything clears up and all these travel restrictions and quarantine orders have been lifted. So as always, if you got any questions, put them in the comments, or you can always email me at dylan@buybigisland.com. And thank you guys for listening and watching, and I'll talk to you guys next week. Aloha.